Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm William Chan.
And I'm Sarah Watt.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. This month, we are discussing The Trial of the Chicago 7, which was released on Netflix this year, and The Social Network, which came out a decade ago. Yes, humble listener, a decade ago in 2010. And the connection being that they are both written by Aaron Sorkin. The great Aaron Sorkin. He's been around for a while. I'm going to hand it over to William. William, give us a bit of a summary of one of our films.
Sure, Jeremy. So Aaron Sorkin wrote and directed The Trial of the Chicago 7. This has been a work long coming. I think Spielberg was supposed to direct back in the mid-2000s. But it is, of course, about the Chicago 7 and the kangaroo court that happened on, I guess it was from 1968 to 1970. Where a bunch of very left-leaning activists were arrested and trialed for their responsible actions, quote-unquote, during the riots at the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. A lot of things go awry, there's jokes, there's people being beat up by police. It's all very, very, I guess, current in a way, which I guess is also the point of the movie.
Thank you. And Sarah, give us a bit of an overview of our other film.
So 2010's The Social Network was directed by David Fincher, but as we say, written by the great Aaron Sorkin. Now, I don't know how many of us are on social networks or are very familiar with this, but it has to do with the internet, which has to do with computers. And back in 2010, when David Fincher made this movie, The Social Network, it's basically about the origins of Facebook. It stars Jesse Eisenberg as Mark Zuckerberg, we watched this fantastic origin story, which we have to say has been fictionalized in quite a lot of ways, but you don't care because you feel that you are getting the essence of what Mark Zuckerberg was and is like, and the genesis of Facebook to become the behemoth that is ruining our lives as we speak. So basically, if Facebook came out, I went on in 2007. So for 13 years, it's been ruining my life. And here we are, overturning democracy since 2000 and whenever it was. So anyway, starring Jesse Eisenberg, wonderful supporting actors, Andrew Garfield, Rooney Mara, Justin Timberlake. And we'll talk a bit more about that shortly.
Brilliant, thank you. And it's fair to say that we will be spoilering both films, so if you haven't seen either film, I would suggest pausing this episode and returning to it at a later date. Great. Look, I want to start with the Social Network, because your comments about Facebook ruining our lives, there's an irony in social media in that it is both an incredible tool of connection, but equally it's got a great many anecdotal connections around people feeling stressed or anxious, or it's raising the, what is it, like grass is greener on the other side kind of anxieties. Mm-hmm. But those were very much part of the discussion of Facebook when that film came out. What has since transpired, I think, would make that film quite difficult to release, which is the influence of Facebook on real political events. The court case, the new court case against Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook around how they treat information and about their duty of care to misinformation and how people are able to share that through their servers. So I don't think you would be able to make The Social Network now in the same way without having a very clear sense of how you're speaking to some of the far more darker implications of social media that I don't think any of us, definitely did not see any of that coming.
And the interesting thing about The Social Network as a film, of course, is it's not really the biography of Facebook, although it kind of is, but it's very, very much about the characters involved. And I think it's worth mentioning, obviously, that Aaron Sorkin is a point of commonality between these two films, but moreover, his screenplays are about real-life events that involve litigation, and admittedly, in one you are in an actual courtroom in the Chicago 7, and you are in boardrooms going through basically people suing one another. So it's ever so slightly different, although they're giving evidence and that sort of thing. So you get that witty cross-examination. But they're both about real life things that happened between people around an event or around in this case, the creation of this multi-billion-dollar business. So,
It's interesting what you say about the materials since Social Network was released. I know a lot of times I've read Aaron Sorkin or people related to the movie talk about making a sequel, which would be fascinating because, my goodness, the world has turned since 2010. Also, I don't know about you guys, but coming into Social Network with the knowledge of what happened in the last 10 years, I think it's made the movie even better. Because the movie, I mean, I know for a fact that when I watched it back, in 2010, it was incredible. It was exciting. There was so much life in the movie. Where, I mean, most of it, yes, is about people either behind computers just typing away, or about people shouting at each other about money or power or class. But I mean, the genesis of something so extraordinary, I feel the energy is just captured so beautifully in the movie throughout. And we'll talk about the ways in which it, is done. But I mean, looking from a 2020 point of view, this is like the origin story of a monster, right? Whether the monster's Mark Zuckerberg or the monster's Facebook, it doesn't really matter. I mean, at a certain point, they're basically one and the same. And it's a villain protagonist, right? I know he is kind of a villain, or he is a villain protagonist, even without all of that context, because he's an awful, awful human being. But looking ahead into what happened later, it's like, okay, this movie actually is prescient in a lot of ways and is really, really scary in many other more.
That is such an excellent point, and it's so right to look back to 2010 when we all watched it contemporaneously when it came out. You're so right. So for me, as I say, I went on Facebook in 2007, and it was a wonderful social networking tool, and it was a repository for photos and a "what are you feeling?" And do you remember back in the early days?
People?
Yeah.
And super poke.
And also they kind of prescribed how you did your status update, because it said Sarah Watt is, and then you had to say feeling happy because university is over or whatever it might be. So the interesting thing is, back then, yes, the film posited that this kind of this weedy geeky guy who had a grudge against a fictitious, actually, girlfriend, then ex-girlfriend, created this. It's interesting you mentioned class. This social network that was actually all about people at Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, being cool, and having that high status kind of connection with other cool high status people. By 2010, we're in it. We're living Facebook, and it feels like a good time. Now, you're so right. We're still living Facebook. We see all the damage that it's done, and to me, you're right about the prescience, because also the Mark Zuckerberg character in Social Network is painted like a bit of a monster, albeit sort of the plant, if you will, from Little Shop of Horrors, Audrey 2, before he has grown into this massive kind of evil dude. And now we can look back and go, yeah, actually, this is a bad scene.
I love that. I love that connection. I love the idea of a sequel. That is very exciting. And I would never, it's not a usual situation for a biographical film to have a sequel. But yeah, there's definitely a lot has happened. I love the way that Sorkin is able to center a film around a very clear character arc and journey. And I mean, people criticize the film for this, and even Zuckerberg said, I didn't create Facebook so that I could get back at my ex-girlfriend. Of course he didn't. But it works as a piece, and the destruction of his best friendship with Andrew Garfield's character, and the kind of longing to be as prestige and status.
Yeah, to be the best,
to
create something huge and life changing, and be the guy who did that because you're a bit of a nothing, although you're a very clever nothing, right?
Yeah.
So and
I loved that in the trial of the Chicago 7. Another brilliant script. I've got lots to say about the actual film, but in terms of the script, another brilliant script in the way that it focused on like you didn't even know that the center of that film was the relationship between Eddie Redmayne and Sacha Baron Cohen's characters. But such a carefully put together arc in that film that comes to fruition at the end.
Also fictitious, but interestingly so.
Yeah, and it gives us such an in into that world, and I loved it. I'm going to keep pushing back there on the Facebook as a monster. I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of its implications, but I think it's easy to overlook that it is a massive part of our lives. I mean, I'm using it almost every moment of the day, messaging people, I'm sharing things. It has opened the door in a lot of great ways. But I think with the recent court proceedings around the elections and Brexit and pushing of misinformation, that's a bigger discussion, which is if you are hosting people's sharing of information, then you must be liable for that sharing, even though you are not directly responsible for it.
And you have a duty of care about it.
It's a complicated piece, right?
Yeah.
But it is an organism of moving parts.
And also, look, let's be honest. It isn't. It's not HAL in 2001. It isn't its own. It's not its own creature. It is the combination of the humans that use it, right? Well, yeah, all right, yeah.
Yeah, true.
Nice. But interestingly...
I've seen Black Mirror. I can see where this is going.
We know where this is going. Interestingly, when you think about the Netflix documentary The Social Dilemma, have you both watched that already? You can't bring yourself to? Oh my goodness. It is absolutely fascinating. And because it's a documentary, it's ostensibly true because you've got proper talking heads of people from Google and Facebook and Twitter and so on now living with enormous regret about the way that what they've created has become. And it's really one of the most interesting parts to me is when we have this lovely face-to-face interview with one of the guys who invented the like button on Facebook. And he said... paraphrasing, obviously, when we created this, we thought this would be a wonderful instrument for people to show likes and appreciations to other people. We never foresaw that in years to come, it would be the mechanism by which young people feel awful about themselves because they don't have enough likes, or they're not getting likes, or they're looking at how many likes other people get. And it's interesting to think about that sort of foreseeability issue. So to be fair, even to Mark Zuckerberg, and, you know, I do have a few issues with it's being ostensibly a network for Ponzi people to connect with other Ponzi people. And that really hit me more on this viewing of The Social Network than in prior times. But really it was about, hey, here's an opportunity for people to connect at university. And we want to see who's dating who, and we want to see if we can go out with them, and all of that is totally fine.
I think it's interesting because when I first started using Facebook in 2007, I was at university, and I remember it being this. It was exciting, and it didn't feel sinister, and there was this joy of being at a party and then seeing the photos of that party that you were in posted and the next day, and I was like, oh my gosh, usually you would never see these photos. And there was the little games and the little sharing, and it was very insular. I think one of the key developments, and we kind of jokingly talk about HAL, but HAL.
Oh, I thought you meant hell. I thought we got there quickly.
From 2001. But it is AI, artificial intelligence, and that Silicon Valley, that's a big focus of their work is around algorithms. And artificial intelligence. And I think, I was talking yesterday to my dad and my nephew about this. You know, back in the day, 10 years ago, on YouTube, you would have a video would go viral, and there would be kind of one page that everybody would typically see of the most watched videos, and so it would help escalate the virality. I don't know if that's the right word, of those videos. But now with the algorithms, we're becoming more and more siloed, and so you're only seeing the things that the algorithm deems as relevant to you, which is a powerful piece of technology.
Yeah,
but it's also incredibly scary. And I again, to pivot again to another point, I've had to sort of remove myself from Facebook this year because I've had loved ones and people I care about posting really concerning conspiracy theories and really extreme views about politics that I think if we were in person, it would be a much more balanced discussion. We would be able to maintain each other's humanity a lot better. But when it's really scary stuff being posted because they're clearly watching and seeing things in their sphere, it's upsetting. I don't really know what to do with some of that information. And that's the end of our podcast. So thank you for listening, dear listeners. I brought it straight down into the depths of despair.
No, it is a bit like the other morning. I thought, having just rewatched Social Network, I thought, you know what, I am actually going to come off this time. I'm actually going to withdraw completely. And then my husband said, well, bear in mind that you use Messenger, and I went, because Messenger is super useful because you can send photos and videos and things through it, and it's super easier, and not everyone I know is doing WhatsApp and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, oh, okay, then maybe all I'll do is deactivate, which I've done before for a limited time only. But even doing that, okay, so that all that means is I'm not engaging on Facebook. Well, who cares? Facebook's still owning all of my photos and all of my data and everything. Yeah. So... it's really hard. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
I love the irony of people that post about conspiracy theories around 5G and things. The government's taking over our lives, and they're posting about it on Facebook.
Yeah.
Like, you are literally giving your life to this great beast of a...
Every time someone posts about Facebook and Google, and then also in the same breath talks about, like, ooh, Huawei is going to take all our stuff. It's like... do you know what you're doing?
Yeah.
Do you know how the world works right now?
Yeah. Anyway, guys, Aaron Sorkin.
Yes, that's right. There's a film.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And moreover, there's a screenplay writer. Yeah. So it's worth telling listeners who probably already know this, of course, that Aaron Sorkin has been writing wonderful screenplays for absolutely yonks. Mm-hmm. I loved his work on The West Wing. It made me want to go into politics because, of course, because that's clearly exactly what it's like, and so therefore maybe I can get an internship at the White House.
You just want to walk down a hallway and
talk at the same time with Bradley Whitford, and it makes sense. And I was like, this is amazing. So that was wonderful. And also, back in the day, guys, and this probably I did see at the time before you were both old enough to, was A Few Good Men. Mm-hmm. One of Tom Cruise's most wonderful moments, one of Jack Nicholson's least annoying moments. I'm not a massive Nicholson fan, TBH. Demi Moore was great in those days. Mm-hmm. And that is an exciting film. You can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
You know, we were saying that to each other the whole time. And that, of course, is a courtroom drama that's indicative of Sorkin's manipulations, because actually... so I went into law. I actually trained as a lawyer because of films like A Few Good Men, because I thought, this is exciting, and that's what I want to do. I want to defend people, and I want the cut and thrust of the courtroom. Mm-hmm. It's not like that. It's super dry, super slow. In New Zealand, you do not walk around the courtroom. You do not approach the witness. You do not approach the jury. And you're standing, and it's very much more staid, as you'll see if you watch clips on One Network News and whatnot.
But can you say things like, you want the truth, you can't handle the truth?
I don't know, I didn't get that far. But I just remember feeling like, oh, it's not like it is in the movies. And I blame Aaron Sorkin, among others, for that sort of thing. But boy, he knows how to make The Trial of the Chicago 7 a zingy... exciting,
and it's all through dialogue. I think the Social Network is very different, even though I think the tones feel similar, but just because one is a Fincher movie and one is a Sorkin movie, Social Network has so much more going on with the visuals and the music and everything else, whereas Trial of the Chicago 7 is really heavily just centered upon its dialogue and its interplays.
I'm gonna take that one step further. I think the Trial of Chicago 7, like I said, brilliant script, terrible direction. It's just, not terrible. It's on the screen.
Yeah, right? It's passable.
But there is no crafting. It feels exactly like a writer has just taken their script and put it on screen.
A play.
There's a play. There's like I talked briefly to Sarah about this the other day. In the office, the riot scenes, which should be the action sequences, the musical moments, the parts of the film, the yacht sequence and the Social Network, all of the montages in the Social Network, those enjoyable, pulsating. That's what the riots should be. They should feel terrifying and fraught, but they just fall flat. And I think it's because he's probably written. And then the riot takes place, which so happens in scripts. And then it takes a good director and a stunt coordinator and a cinematographer to design and craft that sequence with the actors and there's just none of that.
Specifically, there's one scene I feel very strongly about, which is just what you bring up. It's when our main group of heroes, quote unquote, are being cornered outside that bar.
Yes.
And they, I think it's Abby Hoffman who's explaining during stand-up, like inside the bar were the politicians and this and that, and then it's staged so flatly. One of the women looks over and is like, what is that?
Yeah.
And they come through the class.
The pacing's not great,
It
is it?
should have been this crescendo, and instead it just, I don't know, it kind of fizzles
It does.
when it shouldn't.
It is exactly a damp squib. You're right, because we know what's going to happen, and all we're doing is waiting for someone to be pushed through a glass window from her perspective, from her point of view. You're so right. And I think that, but it's interesting that you make the point, William, that what Sorkin, I think, does quite well is he takes something that could be quite dry, which is a court case, and he juxtaposes those scenes of explanation. So instead of hearing evidence from the witness box, which would have been super boring, we get a cross between dramatizations of what happened, which is your riot scene that wasn't very dynamic, and
Real
Abby
footage.
Hoffman's Abby Hoffman recounting it in the stand-up club, and so sort of going from A to B to C to A to B to C.
And then the brief snippets of real footage from, the actual riot.
So he attempts, I think, to keep it quite dynamic in that way, and manages, because it's great when Abby Hoffman in the stand-up club is telling us what happened. It's much more dynamic than anybody on the witness box could have said it, but it's effectively the same information. And then he said this, and he said his head is bleeding, and he said our blood will pour, or blah, blah, blah.
But that's great writing.
Yeah.
Like, that is a great script. And like, I agree with you, that moment with the window is just such a disappointment. There are 3 key moments like that feel like they should be the centerpieces of those acts, and I think that he's so used to writing great scripts.
Yes,
he's able to give that over to a director.
Yes,
and I feel the same with Molly's Game. Molly's Game was a really great script that just was such a boring.
That didn't quite work.
Yeah,
I think I remember giving Molly's Game 4 stars because I appreciated the performances and I loved the story and I was really engaged. But you're right, it didn't quite get there. It was like a high merit, which I always love doing it back to our teaching experience. But hey, it was like a high merit.
Yeah,
it's great that you guys bring up Molly's Game, because I feel like with both Molly's Game and Trial of the Chicago 7. It's the actors that really bring everything up, right?
Yes.
Because the actors through, both movies, and especially in Trial of Chicago 7, of which there are many, many, big name actors, they're almost all amazing. I say almost because Eddie Redmayne's also in there. I don't think he does a very good job, but everyone else I thought is just top of their game.
Yeah. And Sacha Baron Cohen in particular.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I wonder,
his accent's wonky, but apart from that, everything else is incredible.
I wonder how much of that, our admiration for him, is because we're used to him either being a buffoon or a buffoon. I know he's done some serious stuff, but I never watched that The Spy or whatever it is that he's got some on Netflix. I think there's some show about him. I don't know if he's a Mossad spy or whatever. But anyway, I haven't seen a whole lot of his drama. So when you see him in Chicago 7, you're like, holy mackerel, I can take this guy seriously, even though he's miraculously playing a dramatic character who is a joker, because he's cracking jokes the whole time, but you still believe in Abby Hoffman. It's an extraordinary performance, if you get what I mean. There's that real nuance to it. Yeah.
I thought the cast was fantastic. Yaya,
yes,
he's in Watchmen and
Aquaman,
and he's brilliant. But and the race stuff really hit hard. I mean, it's just horrific. I did feel like sort of was just then forgotten about. Like,
that's my question. Why do you think because so much more happened with Bobby Seale during the actual riots and the trial. I mean, reading through a lot of the stuff, he was stuck, clamped down, gagged in that chair for 3 whole days. And that stuff's horrifying, but I guess that's not really the thrust of the film. Like, there's a lot of things, going through a lot of the histories after watching the film, it comes across as, oh my gosh, this could have been an amazing part of the movie, but it's not there.
I agree.
But as you say, I can imagine in the, well, later than the writer's room, they were probably going, oh, look, we'd love to keep it in, but it isn't part of the story. Because you're right, I was reading, after watching the film, reading up on the Chicago 8. And in some cases, they're called the Chicago 8, but then, of course, they become the Chicago 7 when Bobby Seale is and like, okay, mate, don't worry about it. You're not involved in this. Off you go. It does feel unsatisfying and wrong, but it's factual. So I bet they had real dilemmas as to how to deal with that.
My thing is just that there was no real reincorporation of it, and that he
literally disappears from the movie.
Film.
Yeah,
and like I get that he in real life that's effectively what happened in terms of him being removed from that trial, but it was such a weighted part of the movie.
Yeah.
And
also with today's lens, politically, you do not get rid of your only black character who has been treated more appallingly than all of the others. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So that's hard. When you're dealing with history, that's tricky and a bit possibly misguided, probably.
Yeah, I can see like they're probably stuck in a rock and a hard place, because if they removed it, then that would have been a far more, like you're saying, Sarah, far more greater offence. But yeah, I loved all the courtroom stuff. I think Frank Langella was a brilliant villain.
Absolutely amazing.
What a horrific person. And they just, and you're kind of not sure if he's actually going to be bad or not. Initially, I was like, he's not being very good, but I'm not sure where this is going. And he just gets worse and worse.
And he's legit bad. I looked him up after. Like, I was Wikipedia-ing everybody after.
Down the rabbit hole.
And down the rabbit hole, always. And he got real life... Well, it says it in the end credits as well, doesn't it? But yes, 85% of a particular bar of, barristers and whatnot said that he was not good at his job. And... It was interesting for me to watch a lot of what Frank Langella?
I don't know. Langella?
Jella.
Probably.
Okay. GIF or GIF?
Langella. A lot of his moments made me viscerally angry and upset as a viewer, and that doesn't happen often, but it has happened. It happened so much in Sleepers that do you remember the film Sleepers? No. About the abuse of boys in a boys' home? Oh my gosh, very famous cast in its day. I remember pulsating with fury and upset about it, and I didn't quite get to that stage with Chicago 7, but there was so much injustice. It was absolutely staggering. And when you see it in a courtroom environment, which I, either by naivety or by longing, want to believe is the last bastion of a place that you can go and trust that justice will be served, when you've got a judge being that prejudiced and that dismissive, you just think, well, that's it. The world's over. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it sounds farcical, but it's like having an idiot in the White House. As if. But, do you know what I mean, though?
Yeah,
it's like,
totally.
This matters.
I guess, wasn't that, please correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that kind of the point of the whole Chicago, or the trial? That the people, the activists, wanted to show the world how much of a kangaroo court this whole place was. And so that's why all the speaking up, the jokes, the dress up, like it was treated farcically because it was. I guess.
Right.
That's part of the dynamic, though, in the movie, is that the Eddie Redmayne character is believing of Sacha Baron Cohen's character, but he's just a jokester. But somebody says to him, he's a very intelligent person. You shouldn't just write him off. And equally, there's that moment of respect where he realizes that Abby, what's his name?
Hoffman.
Abby Hoffman's read all of Eddie Redmayne's character's essays or articles, and that he realizes that he knows exactly what he's doing, that he's showing it up for what it is. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character knows that right from the start, which is very endearing.
Yeah.
I have to say, though, again, back to the direction. The music is so bad in this movie. And the actual music itself is fine, but it's the way they use it. Like, the opening, I called it hairspray-style music. As in Hairspray the musical, kind of over the montage. And then the final moment where Eddie Redmayne reads out the names of the fallen soldiers, it's so corny. And it should be this wonderful moment of swelling emotions, but it's so badly put
Can we talk about that ending
and the beginning?
I actually quite enjoyed the beginning. It was like, okay, yeah, there's energy, there's pep in my step.
Can I just
yes.
ask? If I remember correctly, the music is all jolly jolly, but the footage is serious.
Yes. Well, some of the footage is serious.
So does it have that Jojo Rabbit-esque kind of...
I think
we're
it wants
dealing with
to.
something horrible.
It wants to, right? Because
Right.
it shows, Vietnamese, actual footage of
Yes.
Vietnamese villages being bombarded
Right.
by napalm.
And I found that gross, but I
Yeah.
figured I was meant to. But
Yeah.
I started off the film going, no, I don't think I'm going to like this. So, yes, that was awkward. Ending, go.
The ending is awful.
It is.
I really quite enjoyed the film throughout, beginning included. Again, the staging's not super great. And I just, sorry you guys, I can't get over Eddie Redmayne putting on an American accent. It just sounds slightly off. It's like he's the guy from Fantastic Beasts. He should speak like this. But anyway, I mean, all that aside, really enjoyed the movie. It was really wrapped up in the courtroom scenes and the Bobby Seale stuff and all that stuff. And then you get to the final 15 minutes. And as you say, Jimmy, the music swells. First of all, Abby Hoffman takes the stand. And he starts talking about platitudes and about, this is what we're here for. He's super serious. And then Eddie Redmayne, as the conscience of the film, stands up. And apparently it's all fictitious, where he reads the names of the fallen. People are giving him a standing ovation. The film ends on a freaking freeze frame. It's felt so unearned, so corny, and just... The rest of the movie has not been building up to this.
Do you know, I was, this is ridiculous, but I was so anxious when he was reading the names out because I knew there were going to be 2,000 names.
4,000.
4,000 names. And he started reading, and I thought, if he just goes, Jeremy Downing, William Chen, then I'll be fine. But he didn't. He was like, Jeremy Downing, age 19, Lieutenant First Class, blah, blah, or something. I was like, we don't have time for this. And I felt the anxiety of being in the courtroom and being like, we've got to get through 4,000 of these.
That's why so many people left in disgust.
Wow. Honestly,
Oh,
I was
what's the time?
No, just say their, it's as good, it's important, just say their names.
Sorry, one more thing, which is, we were talking about Frank Langella. But I have written down in my notes the old fart, because I think that's what his character is. He's just in the back going, I shall have order, boom, 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 with his gavel. And it reminded me so much of the president of Harvard character from Social Network.
Yes.
And how he's just written with exactly the same brush. It's like, oh, you students and your computers.
That's right.
We shall have order.
Fantastic. So the white male, I want to say upper class, not necessarily. What would we call that echelon, though? The people in power who are immediately dismissive of
boomer.
the hippies
Yeah.
and the young people. I mean, Frank Langella, whose judge's name we don't remember.
Hoffman, his name is also Hoffman.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that's right, because they had that whole big debate. Let the record be known that we are not related.
Dad. Yeah, that's right.
And Danny Strong. I didn't even know it was. Is it Danny Strong? Is that his name?
Jeremy Strong.
Jeremy Strong.
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry.
from
I
Succession.
didn't even
Yeah,
I recognized him, but I didn't
Absolutely
make that
wonderful.
connection.
He was so good.
So all of them are so good.
And I think it's such a tough character, right? Because it can so easily be like, oh, it's just a flower power caricature. But there's real emotion and nuance in that performance.
Well, let's talk about the Social Network because similar to having a British Sacha Baron Cohen playing an American, Andrew Garfield, British Andrew Garfield, I think is superb in the Social Network.
Yeah.
And as far as my non-American ear can tell, his American accent is flawless. And his character has so much pathos. And is such a wonderful. I mean, I love the build of of our introduction to their friendship, whereby Mark Zuckerberg, or in this case Jesse Eisenberg, is so rude and dismissive and unseeing of anybody else, and how rude he is when Andrew Garfield's character is trying to get into the fraternities. And it's so brilliantly written that he's cutting without being an outright dick. Hope I'm allowed to say dick on this, but that's the only word for Mark Zuckerberg's character. And so it's absolutely beautiful that Andrew Garfield has this wonderful performance of you can see he's a little bit miffed, but he's still at heart a loyal friend.
Yeah.
And then when it's juxtaposed with the scenes of, the flash forwards, if you will, I suppose, of the case that's going on, you can see how absolutely hurt and sort of bewildered he is by the whole thing.
He's really the heart of that movie. He's so likable and he's such a lovely person that it hits home, right? When the relationship breaks down and he gets totally screwed over. I watched a supercut of that, that great shot where he realizes that he's been liquidated, all of his shares have been liquidated, and he bursts through the doors and he walks and he's screaming, Mark, and then he goes and he grabs the computer and smashes it on the ground.
Yeah.
You can watch a supercut of all of the takes they did of that, and
Oh,
all
wow.
of the computers that they destroyed.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
my goodness.
They must have done that take 30 or 40 times. Because do you know what David Fincher does? One of the things he does,
Well, I know he
adds
does
to his-
103 takes for every blimmin' shot.
So one of the things that he does in his films that means he has to do so many takes is that when a certain character moves, the camera moves. So there's a choreography to it that he needs to get right. And so what they're doing is the moment that Andrew Garfield starts moving, the camera moves with him, and the moment he stops, the camera stops. And that takes a great deal of practice.
Planning,
And then to add on to that, he's trying to see if the performance is right.
Wow.
So I think that's one of the reasons why he does so many takes.
Oh.
Was it Panic Room where I think Jodie Foster said she did more, it was a longer filming period for Panic Room, which took place in one building or set, than Contact, which, they filmed in, I don't know how many countries, but all around the world. And
But did she spend the whole of Panic Room's shoot running to the Panic Room and the camera following her?
Probably.
She would have got very fit.
Yeah, probably. There's probably moments like that, and
Yeah.
And the other person who's notable in The Social Network is Justin Timberlake. And I suppose maybe he's a better analogy for the Sacha Baron Cohen thing because we're used to seeing him as a pop star.
Yeah.
And my God, he is marvellous as Sean Parker. I actually think he's probably more charismatic and exciting than the real Sean Parker. But JT is extraordinary. And the fact that Mark Zuckerberg sort of falls in love with him, and that's part, not actually romantically, but is beguiled by him, and that's how he, flicks Eduardo to the side, is absolutely convincing, because in that wonderful scene where they meet Sean Parker in the Japanese restaurant, you just, I think I texted you guys and went, my goodness, this makes me want an appletini.
Yeah.
Because he's like, what are you drinking? Okay, yes, we'll just get appletinis all round. And just his way, you can understand why anyone would be like, yes, I'd like to partner with you in my business.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think the other cast members are really, really good as well. Armie Hammer is the Winklevoss
I
twins.
love him.
He's so good.
So good.
And I forgot that this was one of his first major roles, right? Because afterwards he did Lone Ranger amongst other stuff. But my goodness, and just the special effects going into making him two of him.
Yes.
Seamless.
So don't you, that it was his body on one and someone else's body on the other, but they stuck his face on the other body.
Like seamless.
Amazing.
The overall visual style of Social Network, I love so much. A lot of it is very bleak. It's very wintry. Yeah, it's winter in Boston. They also, did you guys see all the CGI breath?
Oh,
there's a lot of breath effects which make it look
I
extra
assumed
cold.
it was real, and I was like, "Holy mackerel!" They've literally put Jesse Eisenberg in shorts, a hoodie, and slides, and they're making him act in a cold environment. I was very impressed by that, but now I know it's all a lie.
I think that it just brings in a great contrast when you do cut to Sean Parker for the first time, and he's in sunny Berkeley, and it's like, right, yeah, it really informs a lot about the character as well. But just the situation, its look, its soundscape is incredible.
Was this the first major Trent Reznor Atticus Ross score?
Or at least collaboration with David Fincher. Yeah, I think so.
Because I don't think they'd done much before this.
This is pre-Zodiac, is it?
Oh,
Zodiac,
no, it's
2000
Did they do Zodiac? I can't
It's
remember.
post-Zodiac.
Yeah, right.
But I don't think they did Zodiac. I feel like that's an orchestral score.
Right. So it feels like now it's all about Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, isn't it?
Yeah. But that score is just wonderful, and just from the first moment of the simple piano
Yeah.
sound, and then the sort of rising atmospheric synth is
Gives me goosebumps just thinking about it.
But do you know what? It's also a fairly omnipresent score. Like, you could criticize, I'm not going to, because I absolutely loved it, and from everything we've said earlier, that visceral being swept up in the intensity is amazing. But some might say, take your foot off the pedal, Fincher, because all you're doing is, we get it, kind of. We're feeling, so we don't need that music the whole time. But holy mackerel, we do, because it's super exciting.
It's around the same time that Daft Punk did the Tron
Yes.
Legacy soundtrack.
And I loved that film for the music
yeah.
that it made me feel, not
Yeah.
because the film itself was
Yeah.
particularly outstanding.
It's pretty and the music's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
And because it is so pretty and the music is so amazing, I actually quite like that movie. Even
Yeah,
if the
same.
story's a bit kind of average.
Exactly how I feel.
But it's a rise of those electronic rock
Yeah.
stars, really.
Yeah.
Because then you have like Junkie XL doing stuff for Mad Max, and who was it in Attack the Block? I can't remember, but also amazing score. But yeah, you're right. Just all these electronica artists are heading into like storytelling.
It's very cool. I was listening to or watching an interview with Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor around the Watchmen soundtrack, and they just said, look, we don't really know, like we've never learned this, we just vibe it out, and we kind of, that's how we come up with a lot of our stuff. And it's quite exciting to know that they are really collaborating and crafting and finding their way with their scores, and it feels so full of emotion and dynamism. Dynamism. It's dynamic. And so I love that score.
I have 4 moments written down here that particularly jumped out at me for the score. The intro, as you guys said, that piano like dum 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 with a
Yeah.
kind of you as the audience feel like you're sitting on a bomb, like something's about to go off.
And yet all it is a guy leaving a bar
Going
and
back to
going
his
dorm room.
Yeah, that's But then it's so cool, that opening shot, because you see him go from Greater Boston into the Harvard campus, and the soundscape changes, right? It starts with just a hubbub of conversation and noise. It goes to very, very quiet street sounds. And then once he goes to Harvard, there's a street performer, there's students chatting. It's like, okay, so he's entered into another world, and that's kind of the world that he wants to be in. Some other scenes when Eduardo receives a Phoenix Club letter under his door, and it's just this thumping like, it's an envelope slid under his door.
And it's an envelope with good news. It's not an envelope that says, pay me $6 million, otherwise your daughter will die. So,
the site going live, where, again, it's just a bunch of nerds sitting in a room, like, pressing buttons.
Pressing a button.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Like,
it's
what is
literally
it gonna
a
take?
button.
Pressing enter or whatever.
And then, of course, the scene where Eduardo storms through Facebook offices. Like, oh my gosh, just... they're great moments, very well filmed, but the music is it's the cherry on top that ties everything together.
See, that's what's absolutely missing from the trial of Chicago 7. There's opportunities in that script for moments of greatness, and they're not realized, which is a shame, because Aaron Sorkin has written a script that deserves a much better treatment.
Yeah.
I tell you something though, and I am a massive fan of Social Network, and maybe it's even in my top 10 of all time, but I don't know, let's see. But it's pretty high up there. However, I am always disappointed, the first time most of all, when it ended. Because it feels as though it ends quickly, or not exactly like a damp squib, but it doesn't give you that ba-boom, and we're at the end. It's suddenly over. And there's nothing can be done about it from a historical point of view, because it Facebook was going to continue, was going to evolve, and Eduardo Severin was going to get his payout, and the Voss,
Winklevoss.
the Winklevoss twins were going to get their payout, and so on and so forth. But I remember every time feeling like, oh, this is so great. I wish it would keep going and keep going. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, it's over. Okay.
Oh, but I love the button. The button of it's so brilliant, because the film starts with Jesse Eisenberg and Rooney Mara in the most crowded bar ever filmed. They have got people crammed up against them, and they're having this brilliantly written breakup scene
Yeah.
where he's an absolute dick to her, and she's just wonderful. And that's, that was the first time I saw Rooney Mara, and that's a hint of what was to come. And then it ends with him alone in a skyrise by himself. He's lost everybody, and he's trying to friend her on Facebook. It's so devastating. So I hear you in terms of maybe the pace of it, but the bookending of that
You're
is
so
so
right.
beautiful.
And you're so right. And maybe it was more actually I just wanted it to keep going. Like I really was loving it so hard that I just wanted the story to keep going. Oh, you're right. It's absolutely devastating. And probably this time, in the same way, this viewing, in the same way that I felt more icky about, hang on a second, this is just for rich kids, or it was originally, this is just for rich kids. This is the time when I felt the most sad for Mark Zuckerberg. And
I think he's doing all right.
no, but no, Jeremy.
He was surfing in Hawaii last year.
Yeah, but guys,
And he had a girlfriend that he had through that whole period as well. Like, he did have another girlfriend, and they're still together.
Yeah.
they're married and all. Yeah. But,
Sure.
No, they
I
are.
don't know.
No, he
They
is.
are good.
But no,
Yeah.
but guys, I think we just have to be super careful of this whole idea that, but if people are earning heaps of money and are really successful and have all the sort of the trimmings of wealth, that means that they're happy and we don't need to feel sorry for them. I still feel a degree of sympathy for the character that he is.
The character, okay, I can give
The
you that.
person that
I
he
think
is.
he's, as a person, I think he's the last 10 years aside, I think he was in a much happier place than the character would suggest.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And interestingly, just thinking back to the trial of Chicago 7, I can see Sorkin trying to do a similar bookending, right? Because it starts with young people being drafted, and there is that great shot of the male on the ground and the kid reading his draft.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then it ends with
There are some nice flourishes, directorial flourishes.
Yeah.
But it
It didn't live up to, I think, the potential of that ending.
Yeah.
So maybe it would feel more earned if the opening of that film, because I didn't actually like a lot of the real footage, not because I didn't care about the real footage, but
Okay.
it felt tonally messy.
Right.
And I feel that opening sequence was. I mean, I was much happier with the film when the title came up and we got into the trial.
Okay.
I found the montage poor.
I thought the montage was okay. Like I enjoyed how basically everything was just in such broad strokes. Martin Luther King Jr. dead. Bobby Kennedy dead, and you don't need to explain. You just know that it happened.
Yeah.
You don't need to see them on the ground, or
Yeah.
you do kinda, but you just know that it happened.
Yeah.
And it ties into what's to come. It's like this is chaos. There's energy in the air. There's people dying. This is what the backdrop is, right?
But I don't know, because I'm aware of those details, but I don't think it was clear from the film actually what it was, the picture it was trying to paint.
Right.
Like, if you don't have that knowledge already, it's really, well, if you do have that knowledge, it's just a bit of a revision, right? Oh, that's right, this is where we're at. But for a lot of people, a lot of young people today wouldn't know those events, apart from Martin Luther King Jr., that's pretty well known.
Yeah.
But Bobby Kennedy, I only know about that because I watched the movie Bobby. The Vietnam War, the Vietnam American War, I should say, and the drafting is something that I'm fascinated by, so I've got a really clear sense of that time. But
I wonder though, so people like my aunt, who's in her mid-70s, she watched it and absolutely loved it because she lived through it. She was working in news at the time, so she lived through the situation. So you're right, she's the sort of person who brings her prior knowledge and really appreciates it all. I mean, knows all the character names as real people and so on. I wonder whether that it doesn't really matter if you kind of know who Bobby Kennedy is or wasn't, and did he die or why or whatever. And maybe it doesn't matter because the trial is about injustice, and that's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's about 7/8 people and a dick of a judge, and so therefore it doesn't matter too much.
I hear you, and I agree. It's just the way that it's put together is
Yeah.
messy. It's sort of real footage, jokey footage, horrific footage. That's found footage,
Yeah.
or original. Again, it's a direction issue.
The interesting thing is, I didn't mention JFK as a possible connection film because it isn't written by Aaron Sorkin, but directed by Oliver Stone. And at the very beginning of JFK, I think it's fair to say that we can all assume that if you're going to watch the film JFK, you know it's about John F. Kennedy, and you know that it's about his shooting, and you know it's about the conspiracies around his death. But at the very beginning of the film, what Oliver Stone does is chuck out heaps and heaps of archive footage and a voiceover of Martin Sheen bringing us up to speed about Kennedy and the Bay of Pigs and Cuba and blah and blah and blah. It's pretty dry, I've got to tell you. And for me, that film really comes alive, and I love it as a courtroom drama with good old Kevin Costner, who used to be amazing.
Where's he gone?
Well,
He was Superman's dad, right? I mean, that's
he's in a
that's the
film
where
So he's on Krypton.
No, he's in a film coming out with Diane Lane.
who played Superman's mom, like Together Again.
That's
They did
true.
mime Pa Kent.
That's right.
In the Snyder
what-
movies,
So
yeah.
in this film, they are a couple whose son gets in trouble with some rednecks. It feels a little bit like Fargo season 2, to be honest. And that's coming out in a couple weeks' time. And it's called Let Him Go. So since you ask, that's Kevin and Diane. But anyway, just saying, yeah, Oliver Stone does a similar thing, and his movie is flipping 2 hours, 23 minutes. And he does a similar thing of, no, I lie, it's not as long as that, but whatever, of chucking out all that information, blah, 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 before we get into the juice of the picture. Is it necessary? Does it work? I don't know.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Amazon Music. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, which are great places to let us know what you think of this episode or give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, which will be our wrap-up of 2020, and it will be a little different than what we've done in the past because, 2020's been a year. And until then,
Nor am I.